Thank you. Let's call the roll.
Roll call for the meeting of April 26th, 7:30 PM. Councilor Tantar.
Present.
Councilor Vogel.
Present.
Councilor Wallace.
Here.
Councilor Zede.
Here.
Councilor Devlin.
Here.
Councilor Khan.
Present.
Councilor Lane.
Here.
Councilor McCauley.
Here.
Councilor Connell.
Present.
Councilor Shan.
Present.
and Councilor Eigenman.
Here,
All present and accounted for.
late file items.
There are two committee items that just missed the packet. It's committee communication 240 memo regarding the SLY submission information, and communication 293, which is a letter from Jane Snow. Those are the only two items.
Motion to waive the rules so that we can hear those committee items.
Second.
Roll call.
On the late file, waiving the rules, Councilor Tantar,
Yes.
Councilor Vogel,
Yes.
Councilor Wallace,
Yes.
Councilor Zede,
Yes.
Councilor Devlin,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor McCauley,
Yes.
Councilor Connell,
Yes.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
and Councilor Eigenman.
Yes, thank you. Okay, now this is the public comment portion of the evening. So there are 32 attendees here on the Zoom call. Anyone who wishes to speak, all you have to do is raise your hand electronically, you give your name and your address, you get 2 minutes. Please, you have to be limited to something that's on our agenda. Doesn't mean we have to get to it, but it has to be listed on the agenda. First, I have Philip Cootie. Name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Philip Cootie. I live at 22 Phillips Drive in Newburyport, Massachusetts. I'm here to speak in support of the Pioneer League. I've been a parent of the Pioneer League for close to 12 years. Pioneer League mandate is to make baseball approachable for everyone and is a fantastic endeavor to teach kids how to play this great sport. And it's a sport that I dearly love. Now, over the years, I've cleaned, raked leaves, sanitized benches, and coached and done whatever I could to make playing at Pioneer League Park a safe and wholesome time for all families and players. The league has informed me that they are working with the city on a plan to paint the lines and parking along Merrimack Street. And I'm here to voice my support for these lines on safety principles and the principles of the park to make baseball approachable. On a weekly basis, I go to the park with my children to play baseball, and I must navigate traffic as I pull gear out of my truck and my van and worry and concern from the approaching traffic. And I think that the city should paint these lines and make parking along Merrimack Street in front of this baseball park safe for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cootie. Next is Connie Preston.
Hi, Connie Preston, 18 Atwood Street. I am the chair of the Tree Commission, and I just wanted you to be aware that I'm here in case you have any questions when it comes time to discuss the transfer of the donation from Friends of Newburyport Trees.
Thank you very much. Next is Bill Walsh.
Hi, Bill Walsh. I'm at 4 Norman Avenue, Newburyport. I'm also involved with the league, so I know Phil well too, and I'm often down at the park, multiple times a week with the same concerns. But my biggest concern is this year where we've got the freshly paved road, no crosswalk markings. I mean, it's as dangerous as it could be in the past when we've had all these markings. But I mean, we've got the cones out there. We're trying to do the best, but as we start to get underway, like we will next week with all the games and the heavy traffic, and now with that freshly paved road and the speed of the cars, I'm just really concerned. We've had a lot of accidents with cars in the past. Thank God we haven't had a pedestrian, but I'm nervous that it's going to happen one of these days. So I think we need to address this as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Welch.
Yep.
Next is Mark Menery. Hold on just a second. Go ahead, Mr. Menery, if you unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Mark Menery. I'm at 5 Moran Road in Newburyport. I too been with the Pioneer League for quite a number of years now. I think 7 to be exact. Coach with Bill, with Phil. I'm a board member. I actually head up the equipment part of the league. You know, I'd really like to voice my concern as well. Actually, I'm someone who has gotten into a fender bender down on Merrimack Street, right behind the clubhouse. I spent a lot of time at the clubhouse being in charge of equipment, you know, heading in and out of that back door. You know, with all of those cars parked on that back road, one of the biggest issues for me is when kids are getting out of the car and have to go around the car. They're literally walking in the street. I've almost got hit by a car. I've witnessed younger kids almost get hit by a car. I don't mean to sound too dramatic, but for me, when the baseball field is loaded up and crowded, I honestly feel like it's one of the more dangerous parts in the city of Newburyport when it comes to cars and children. With the cones and, you know, the barrels that were put out recently, it actually did a number of good things to slow down traffic. Anything more that we can do down there would be a huge benefit for safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Rachel Blinderman.
Hi, my name's Rachel Blinderman, 9 Ashland Court. Also here speaking on behalf of Pioneer League. Anything that we can do to enhance the safety. Last summer, while I was watching my son's baseball game, my car was completely totaled on Merrimack Street. It was parked actually in a legal spot on Merrimack Street. And it was a really not so pretty accident. And I was approached by the police. There was fire trucks, ambulances, and luckily nobody was injured. But the one thing I kept thinking was, oh my God, like what if we were getting out of that car at that moment or someone was crossing the street? And it just really want to echo what everyone else has said, that we really need to prioritize and enhance as many safety precautions as we can, because we do have kids that are very excited running across the street. And then you think about all the parallel parking, people backing out into Merrimack Street. It's a recipe for disaster. So I support any safety enhancements that can be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blinderman. I don't see any other hands up. Anyone else? Okay, I think that's it for public comment. Oh, no, here are a couple more hands. Hold on. Corey Scrubs is next.
Good evening, guys. Corey Scrubs, 253 Merrimack Street. I too want to voice my thoughts on the safety of the Merrimack Street in front of Pioneer Field. Just like anything else, I think you take your life into your hands down there on a Saturday or a weeknight when we're trying to get our kids to the games. It's quite dangerous down there. So anything you guys can do to enhance the safety for our whole community there would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is Matt Morrissey.
Yeah, kind of ditto 22 Milk Street, kind of ditto everyone else. I was in the first base box coaching last year during a game when a car smashed into another car during the game. And we literally had to herd the kids from running off the field to go see the accident. And I'd kind of rather not that be the sort of thing they remember about playing Pioneer football. But it literally stopped the entire game. And we had to say, kids, get back on the field. So it's real. I think everyone knows that. So whatever we can do would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Any others? Going once, going twice. Okay, I think that's it for public comment. Thank you to everyone who spoke. Next is Mayor's comment. So let me recognize Mayor Donna Holliday. Go ahead, Madam Mayor.
Good evening, President Ackerman, members of the City Council. A few quick updates tonight. We've been obviously working on finalizing the FY22 budget to be delivered to the city council on the day of your next meeting, May 10th. We have been coordinating with Councillor Z, Chair of Budget and Finance, and have all the department heads scheduled and available to answer your questions during the budget workshop sessions. The school department will hold a public hearing as required tomorrow night, April 27th, and we will be voting on the school budget on May 3rd. The House Ways and Means released their FY22 budget proposal on April 15th. Unfortunately, despite the news reports about the House increasing Chapter 70 aid over and above what the governor proposed, Newburyport did not benefit. In fact, since our charter school sending tuition assessment went up, our net state aid actually went down by $12,646,000 compared to what the governor had proposed. That being said, we're close to balancing the budget. We're still about $139,000 short, but we really are committed to keeping the 2 world language teachers for the 6th grade and have proposed budget cuts. And I believe that we will get there in terms of being able to present you a balanced budget on May 10th. Quick vaccination update. Over 19,000 vaccines have been administered through the Lower Merrimack Valley Regional Collaborative. And we are in the planning stages of moving that clinic to the Knock Middle School Gymnasium starting the weekend of May 8th. Will be opened most Saturdays and Sundays through May, except Mother's Day, Memorial Day, and depending on demand, we'll continue. Our plan is to continue providing vaccines through that clinic at least through the end of June. I'm happy to report that the Beth Israel Leahy Clinic will continue at the Senior Center through the end of May, and they've moved to weekends to give Wednesdays and Thursdays plus the 10th that's going up May 1st for seniors, and we've been able to work out a situation there. As of last Thursday, according to the state's latest report, 63% of Newburyport residents have received at least 1 dose of the vaccine, and 44% are fully vaccinated. So that is really good news. Plum Island, GZA, our engineering consultant, continues to work on the NEPA permitting for the short-term protective project for Reservation Terrace with the wood pilings and core bags. And to be included with this project all along has been the removal of the super sacks currently along Reservation Terrace. However, permitting is taking much longer than anticipated, so that I have reached out to Mass DOT and DCR to assist the city and renting needed equipment for beach access and to provide staff for us to assist the city DPS workers in removal of the sacks. Permitting continues to move forward on the Army Corps of Engineers DREAD project on the Merrimack River, with anticipation of that work commencing in late fall. Newburyport schools, as of today, the entire school district is back in person learning for all families that chose to attend in person. We have also been notified by the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority, that our statement of interest request for the science labs and new roof at the high school was not accepted. We are planning to resubmit a new SOI for these projects to the MSBA, and the SOI statement of interest will need to be voted on by both the school committee as well as the city council prior to submission. So we will be working on that, and I will keep the council informed by that timeline and our SOI to be reviewed by both you and the school committee. Shared streets, the parklets will be completed this week. The planters went out today and were placed, and landscapers coming in to fill those with sand and various plantings for each of the restaurants this week. In addition, the pedestrian improvements at the intersection of State Street and Pleasant Street will be wrapping up. 3 of the 4 corners will be completed by the end of this week, and the final corner at Richdale's will be completed by the end of next week. Just wanted to let you know that the annual Chamber of Commerce meeting is a hybrid meeting with some people being at Blue Ocean and others will be able to Zoom in this Wednesday night. I'm happy to report that our Health Director, Frank Giacalone, will be receiving the Chamber's Community Heroes Award for his hard work and dedication taking on the COVID-19 pandemic locally. The award is given annually to local advocates to increase and promote opportunities for safety, best practices, and resources. Congratulations to Frank. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our outgoing president, Frank Cousins, on his tenure leading the chamber and our business community through very tough and uncertain times. Frank and I worked very closely over the last year to help support our local businesses and aid in their recovery. And thank you to Frank. And I look forward to working with the chamber's new president, Kathleen O'Connor Ives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there questions? Yes, Councillor Devlin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Through the president, Madam Mayor, when you say you're working on, the school committee is working on balancing the budget, what does that mean exactly? What are they balancing the budget against?
The school committee's budget is balanced. We need to balance it when we absorb that budget into the budget for the city. And so what we're trying to do is accommodate the priority for one of their priorities that we felt was really important and has been a priority for the school committee, is to continue the expansion of world languages. And so the request for $130,000 for 2 additional foreign world language teachers at the 6th grade to again continue to expand world languages is being incorporated into our budget, and we're finding a way to balance our budget without with including that in our FY22 budget. The school budget is balanced.
Right. So the school budget, the school has a budget and they have a number that they want and services they want to provide. They're not working on trying to incorporate it into the overall budget. That's what you and the finance director are doing, or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for the mayor? Thank you, Mayor. I think you're all set.
Thank you. Have a good meeting.
Thank you. On to the consent agenda.
Which consists this evening of the approval of the minutes for April 12th. There are 5 communications. Communication 320 is a notice from the retirement board regarding COLA. All 5 communications out of are received and filed. The next 4 communications are referencing 117 Indian Hill Street. Communication 321 is the map. Communication 322 is the appraisal report. Communication 323 is a photo of a stream and an aerial photo. And 324 is a cover letter from DeRosa Environmental. There's one transfer 95, receipts for appropriation $35,000 DPS to highway, fuel, and oil, same amount. That's to go to budget and finance. There is one appointment. It's appointment 241. It's Bonnie Sontag, who lives at 21 Smith Street, to the Fruit Street Historic Commission until 5/31/2024. Following items, committee items are removed when we take the vote on this consent agenda. Budget and finance, transfers 90, 91, 92, 93, and 94, and order 243. Public utilities, appointment 240. All those items are out automatically, and that's the consent agenda this evening, Mr. President.
Councillor Z.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to strike transfer 90 as coming out of budget and finance. That will remain in committee for additional questions at an upcoming committee meeting.
All right, that's pulled. Anyone else have anything they need to pull? Not seeing anything. Okay.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Councillor Tonto.
Yes.
Councillor Vogel.
Yes.
Councillor Wallace.
Yes.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Devlin.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane,
Yes.
Counselor McCauley,
Yes.
Counselor Connell,
Yes.
Counselor Shan,
Yes.
Counselor Agaman.
Yes. Okay, regular agenda.
Questions and answers, City Solicitor.
We seem to have a problem in that I don't know if the city solicitor is on the call.
I do see,
Um,
I don't either. I see two phone numbers.
Yeah. Hmm. That's a bit of a shock. Well, we're gonna table that item and move to mayor's update.
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion received and file mayor's update. Counselor Tontar,
Yes.
Counselor Vogel,
Yes.
Counselor Wallace,
Yes.
Counselor Z,
Yes.
Counselor Devlin,
Yes.
Counselor Khan,
Yes.
Counselor Lane,
Yes.
Counselor McCauley,
Yes.
Counselor Connell,
Yes.
Counselor Shan,
Yes.
Counselor Agaman.
Yes. Next item.
There are no communications and there are no first reading of appointments. The second reading of the appointment of Kevin Hunt, 14 10th Street, Veterans Agent until 4/1/2022.
There a motion?
Motion to approve. Second reading.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Second.
Thank you.
Simultaneous.
Roll call on the second reading for Kevin Hunt. Counselor
Okay,
Tontar?
but hold on, before you do that, I have a couple of hands up.
Sorry.
Counselor Tantar.
Yeah, I just had a point of order on the tabling. Do we need a motion to table to, are we tabling till later in this current meeting or?
No, I guess I'm just gonna skip it as chair. I shouldn't have used the word table. Sorry. I didn't mean to confuse you. I'm just gonna skip it for now. I just emailed the city solicitor. We'll get back to it if they pop up.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Counselor Z.
Well, I had two things. One is I was going to say that I had hoped to have some responses from the city solicitor before voting on more appointments as they relate. But then I also wanted to tell you that Darren Klein is in the attendees list now. So I don't know if that helps.
All right, well, yeah, that definitely helps. Okay, well, let's finish. We're on item 13. So if anyone wants to speak on the second reading of Kevin Hunt as Veterans Agent, Counselor Lane.
Yeah, I won't be voting in favor of this appointment right now until we have our meeting with the solicitor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselor McCauley.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could put this on hold until we get direction from the city solicitor. I think that all of these appointments going forward are relevant to this discussion. So
Okay.
I'm not sure what the process is, but
Well, this one, it's already before the council, so this one I will need a motion to table. That's all I got to do.
I'll make a
So-
motion to table this.
All right, do we have a second on the motion to table?
second,
Okay. It's not debatable. Roll call.
I have a motion to table by Counselor Lane, seconded by Counselor McCauley. Counselor Tontar,
Yes.
Counselor Vogel,
No.
Counselor Wallace,
Yes.
Counselor Z,
Yes.
Counselor Devlin,
Yes.
Counselor Khan,
Yes.
Counselor Lane,
Yes.
Counselor McCauley,
yes,
Counselor Connell,
No.
Counselor Shan,
Yes.
Counselor Agaman.
Yes.
Motion.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to welcome Attorney Darren Klein. I've allowed him to speak. Attorney Klein is from KP Law, who's the city solicitor, serves as city solicitor. There were some questions that were sent in advance that had been proposed, had been sent by Counselor Zede, and Attorney Klein has those. But before we just jump into the Q&A, I wanted, many of us have not met Attorney Klein. If he could just, if he'd be willing, Mr. Klein, to just tell us how long you've been working on employment matters for the city? I think it's many years now.
Yeah, so good evening through the council president. Thank you for having me this evening. I apologize. I took 8 o'clock sharp literally to mean 8 o'clock sharp, so I didn't join on until about 7:50. So I apologize
Nice.
if
Okay.
it was
All
a
right.
couple
No, I
minutes.
love it. No, that's a good reason.
But I did receive the questions. I'm prepared to answer all of those questions. I've been doing, I'm head of the labor group at KP Law. I'm also head of the education law group at KP Law. I've been practicing labor laws, God, for 27 years now. That is unbelievable to me, actually. And I've been doing most of the labor and employment issues for the city. I couldn't tell you the exact date, but I want to say it's close to 20 years, give or take a year or two. You know, I it began with Mayor Clancy, and it's been straight through. So I guess we'd have to add up the years, but it seems to be about 20 years to me.
Okay. Well,
And I
thank you.
haven't, I know, although it's been a few years, I have appeared in front of the council before, though it's been a while.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for tonight, because yeah, it's probably been 7 years, because I don't think I've been on 7 and we haven't met. But okay, before you jump into Councilor Zeid's questions, if you'd be willing to, read the question and then provide the answer, we can go that way. Councilors should feel free to raise their hands electronically. But just to notify the public, the item is about department head contracts. So there are, as I understand it, there are 2 different kinds of department head contracts. There are some department heads who are subject to a collective bargaining agreement. So for example, I believe the mayor is negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement with the Teamsters local for certain department heads. An example would be Andy Port, our planning director, is in that group. I don't know all the members. Then there's another group which are not union members, and their contracts are also controlled by a body of state law that Attorney Klein will have to explain to us. For example, the fire chief, there's a whole statute on that, and I don't know how that interplays with our charter and our ordinance and contractual law. And so we have to talk about that. And that contract, for example, was recently signed. And I think it has a 5-year term, just to give you an example, whereas the collective bargaining agreements are 3-year term. Okay, that's enough. Maybe Attorney Klein, you should just start us off, with the questions and answers.
Sure, I will go through the questions and answers, and I think those will lead to more questions, which is fine. And I'm happy to take the questions as you bring them to me. I probably can't see everybody's hands, so I'll go through you, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, picking up on something you said, there being a few different types of contracts, and just very generally, the contracts probably fall into about 3 or 4 different groups. Okay, you have your union collective bargaining agreements, which does include some of your department heads. Collective bargaining agreements by law under Chapter 150, Section 7 are limited to 3-year terms. An important thing to know for your union contracts, which is very different than all the other contracts we're going to discuss, is once the city council funds the cost items in the first year of a collective bargaining agreement, you then have a binding agreement for the next 3 years. So that, again, the mayor negotiates and agrees to a contract that's subject to funding by the city council. Once the city council funds the first year of that collective bargaining agreement, it's a binding 3-year contract. The only thing to remember about that is if in year 2 or 3, the council doesn't fully fund the contract, then obviously the city needs to cut its level of services and determine the best way to do that. The rest of your employment contracts or your employees fall into a few different groups. There is Chapter 4, and I'm going to not include the school superintendent, who's under a whole different statute. But you have employees that fall under what's called Chapter 41, Section 108, N as in Nancy. I believe the only employee you have that falls under that statute is your finance director. Under that statute, the mayor is authorized to enter into a multi-year binding contract that would be binding really regardless of council action. So at the time that the mayor agrees to that contract, it's binding. Now, I do want to step back a second. We're going to talk a lot about two terms tonight, contracts and appointments, and they're very different things. So I want to back up a second. For every department head, the mayor's appointment is subject to confirmation by the city council. Okay. So for the mayor to appoint any department head or reappoint any department head, that's subject to approval by the city council. Now, I haven't seen the terms of those appointments, but those can take a number of forms. They could be appointed for a specific term of years, in which case it would be subject to a reappointment. So for example, if your finance director was appointed for a 3-year term, at the end of that term, if the mayor wanted to reappoint that person, it would specifically take a reappointment that would again be subject to confirmation by the city council. I suspect that many of your employees and even department heads, and I don't know this for a fact because I haven't seen the actual appointments, are indefinite appointments, which is pretty common in the public sector. They are indefinitely appointed, they can be terminated, but in that case, once that appointment is confirmed by the council, there is no need for the mayor to reappoint that person. The mayor will either continue that person's employment or at some point move to terminate if there's reasons to terminate. But an indefinite appointment would not be subject to any reappointment. So that's the appointment. There's no requirement that any employee have a contract, but those that do, if you're an indefinite appointment and you have a 3-year or 2-year or 1-year contract, that contract expires at the end of that term, but not necessarily, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the appointment unless they run for the same term. Some of your employees, your department heads may have a term in the contract that runs concurrently. So I just want to kind of keep that straight when I go through all the different questions, but the appointment and the contract are two different things under two different rules. All appointments and reappointments are subject to council confirmation. Contracts are not, but they're certainly subject to annual funding by the council. So we said that there's three types of contracts. Contracts that fall under 41108N, which I believe is probably only your finance director. I don't know if your auditor or a city accountant has contracts, but they would arguably fall under that statute as well. The other, and you mentioned it, is the police chief, the city marshal and the fire chief fall under what's called chapter 41, section 1080. They are also entitled to multi-year contracts that the mayor can enter into. However, those contracts and every other contract we're going to talk about are subject to annual appropriation. So whether it's a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract or a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, in reality, there are a series of 1-year contracts that are subject to annual appropriation, okay? All except for, as I said, the finance director contract, which is under different rules. Then you have sort of everybody else. The city has the mayor has a general executive authority to enter into contracts with any department head. And again, there's nothing prohibiting a multi-year contract, but it would be subject to annual appropriation and would really be treated as a series of 1-year contracts. So with that kind of general background, I'm going to go through the questions and I will read them before I answer them. And again, any questions that you tell me about, I'll stop and take. What is the mayor's power to renew employee contracts that have not yet expired? In my opinion, the mayor has the authority to renew any contracts even prior to expiration, although they are subject to annual appropriation by city council. So it's not uncommon to extend somebody's contract. It's usually negotiated before the term of the contract actually expires, so there isn't a period of time where there isn't a contract. Not always. That's kind of usually the goal. It doesn't always happen. But the mayor, there's nothing prohibiting the mayor from extending or renewing a contract. Although again, that contract is subject to annual appropriation by the city council. The second question, when do these contracts need to come before the council? Is it true that they cannot be considered binding on the city until ratified by the council? What is the timeline and process for this? So non-union contracts are not ratified by the council, although, as I've already said, they're annually funded. A multi-year union collective bargaining agreement is considered binding once the first year cost items are funded by the council. I said that at the beginning. If subsequent years of a union contract are not funded, the city would need to would need to reduce the level of services. That sometimes comes in cuts in pay, layoffs, elimination of certain positions, which is essentially the same thing as a layoff. But that's what would need to happen in the second or third year of a contract if sufficient funding isn't given. If the council doesn't fund the first year of the contract, the parties are required, there is no valid contract, and the parties are required to return to the bargaining table for further bargaining. The third question, is there any limitation on length for these contracts? For example, it appears that some are being executed for 5-year periods. How long can the mayor and city council, through its approval process, bind the city? So there isn't by law any specific term or length limitation on non-union employment contracts. However, the general rule of thumb is to avoid public policy challenges, because many actions that the mayor or council can take can be challenged on public policy grounds, that the general rule is basically, no greater than 3 to 5 years. As I said, union contracts are limited to 3 years. Employment contracts, the general rule of thumb is 3 to 5 years. If a contract is ever challenged on public policy grounds, one of the things you do here is sort of sunset or sunset appointments, sunset contracts, lame duck contracts, different terms that are used. The courts, if it ever gets that far, they don't look at one factor. They look what to basically set aside a contract on a public policy ground. You need to show that it was entered into bad faith. And that just is looked at by a bunch of different subjective factors and circumstances that may exist when a contract is looked at. But one thing that anyone who challenged a contract would need to prove is that the contract was entered into bad faith for it to be set aside. So again, the general rule of thumb is 3 to 5 years. Anything more than that, I would say would, be at risk for being, not consistent with good, sound public policy. Number 4, what is the relationship between the employment contract and the city council's appointment approval authority? For example, if the council does not reappoint, but a contract is in existence at that time, what is the status? As I said earlier, that answer is going to depend on the terms of appointment. If an appointment is indefinite, renewing the contract is not the same thing as the reappointment, and the renewed contract would need approval, but would not be annually funded. If the contract and term of appointment ended on the same date, then the reappointment would be subject to approval by the council. If the council failed to approve the reappointment, then the city could argue that the contract is void and unenforceable. Again, this is only in a situation where the appointment terms has expired and it's not for an indefinite appointment. So again, I would argue that if a contract was entered into prior to a person being appointed or reappointed, and the council ultimately did not approve that appointment, I think the city would have a strong argument that that contract is unenforceable. Number 5, in the event that the mayor provides for a specific salary or a contractual obligation for no reduction, except in certain cases, in an employment contract, but a mayor or the city council does not fund it, what is the result? Well, just to be clear, the mayor doesn't fund. That's completely within the authority of the city council. For most non-union contracts, except for contracts that fall under 41-108N, which I believe is only one contract we're talking about, if there is not a sufficient appropriation for that contract term, the city would have an argument that it's not bound by the financial provisions of the contract, and the mayor and the employee would need to renegotiate. So if the mayor has a 1-year contract with an employee or a 3-year contract and it's year 2 or 3, and the council does not approve, it doesn't necessarily void the entire contract, but I would say the financial provisions, in my opinion, would not be enforceable. And that would obviously force the mayor and the employee to renegotiate those terms. Number 6, what is the impact of these contracts for a future administration to terminate a department head? What is the impact on the council to not approve appointments? All right, so all of the contracts that were sent over to me have termination provisions in them. It is different standards for different employees. You have personnel rules and even certain ordinances and bylaws that would be, that would affect the ability to terminate. But so the fact that there's not a contract would not, the fact that there is a contract, I'm sorry, would not prevent the next mayor from terminating people, or the current mayor from terminating people. They might have to be consistent with the terms of the contract, but every contract has a termination provision in it, and it's usually based on conduct and certain other issues. Now, sometimes contracts kind of have severance provisions worked in, which could basically allow for a termination without cause or at will. And if the city decides to go in that direction, it usually requires some sort of severance to be paid. But the fact that you have a contract does not prohibit termination. You just would need to be consistent with the rules or the contract provisions that apply.
Well, let me break in there, because that's
sure.
I have a question about that. So say, for example, a contract with a department head says, you can only terminate this department head under XYZ conditions. That's what the contract says.
Yep.
And then a new chief executive comes in and says, you know what, I want my own department head in that department. And I don't want to, I want to terminate this person and bring in another person. Or say their appointment is up, the city council doesn't actually initiate appointments. We just react to them.
Sure.
So the new chief executive says, I'm not going to reappoint this person. I'm going to appoint somebody else. What happens then? Does the non-reappointed former department head have a claim for breach of contract, which binds the next chief executive who had nothing to do with the negotiation that the last chief executive did?
Okay, so there's a few different possible scenarios in that case, and again, it's not unusual that the hypothetical that you gave is a pretty common one, in that the current mayor may look for a certain style in a certain position, and the new mayor may look for a different style.
That's right.
But I would say this: the contract should never be greater than the appointment. So if you have, I'm just trying to pick a random position. If your
dog catcher has a 2-year appointment, and when they're appointed, it says they're appointed for a 2-year term expiring on June 30th, 2021, then they should not have an employment contract. At the same time, they shouldn't enter into a 3 or 4 year employment contract, because the contract shouldn't be longer than the appointment. So again, if the appointment ended and the contract continued, I think you would have a solid argument, because that contract would be subject to city council approval and the appointment would be subject to city council approval. I think you'd have a strong argument that the contract is not enforceable. Just so you know, there's a very important body of law that has to deal with public sector contracts, which is very, very different than private sector contracts.
And what it basically says that if you enter into a contract in any way with an official that doesn't have all the legal authority he or she needs to enter into that contract, you're basically, the risk is in the hands of sort of the private party, meaning that, you know, you're kind of, you kind of move at your own own risk. So if you enter into a 10-year contract with somebody who only has the authority to give you 3 years, then these cases say that, you know, when you're dealing with a public sector entity, you need to know, you know, whether or not they have the authority. And if this, you know, basically it sort of ensures in that situation. And that's case law. That's not under any statute.
And that sounds like it speaks also to good faith, you know, because if you know that your appointing authority can't actually assure that you'll be employed past 1 year and you sign a contract for 3, well, that's on you.
Yes, the only thing I would just say with that is that's when there's specific terms of appointments, because
Right,
you
rather
do-
than indefinite. I
Yeah,
understand.
because it is, every mayor inherits employees that he or she didn't appoint.
Okay.
And that's just common. Just the last question, similar to the questions above, are the same principles applicable to other contracts that may have been signed recently? A little bit hard to answer that, but generally speaking, yes. I mean, I tried to cover all the different types of basis. So those were the questions that were sent to me, and I'm happy to answer any in more detail or any new questions that you have.
That'd be great. I do have some hands up. So first is going to be Councilor Zede.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney Klein, thank you very much for going through my list of questions. I appreciate it. Very helpful. Just a couple of follow-ups to start. So perhaps one I would direct either now or later to the city clerk, but in my reading of the documents that were provided to us and some research into appointments, we absolutely have situations where we have contracts and appointments that are not in sync or even not at all in sync, meaning that there are appointments that expire prior to the new terms that have been signed in the agreement. So you mentioned that that's an important thing, but I would like to ask if we could formalize that. And I believe we have all or most of the contracts now, the new ones, and then we were also provided with the previous iteration. But if the clerk could be so kind to pull the appointment dates, not now, not live, but just so that we can harden that, because I'm doing that a little bit on the, but that's my, from my research, we do absolutely have that situation where there are appointments that will expire before contracts will expire. So I'm very concerned about that personally. And
I just wanted to follow up on that very quick. So I don't think it's all that uncommon for maybe the contract to be extended. You know, I don't know what time your timing on appointment. So that in and of itself is not problematic. However, yes, the contract does not in any way, if the appointment term expires, the contract, in my opinion, does not in any way usurp the council's right to approve or not approve that appointment. So it's nothing wrong with the contract, you know, being put in place first. However, it does not take away this body's right to approve or disapprove of that appointment.
But Darren, what about latches, or do we have to seek a remedy now?
No, well, in regards to what?
If we're made aware of this disconnect, we don't need to do anything now. You said the case laws, it puts the burden on the city employee.
It does. I mean, you know, I'm not sure the employee may argue otherwise, but yes, I agree with that. But what I'm saying is if you have a contract that was signed, you know, for the next 2 or 3 years, but the appointment comes up at the end of this year, all I'm saying is this: the city council has not lost their right, in my opinion, to make a decision on that reappointment.
Yeah, no, I follow you. I just wanted to make sure to answer Councilor Zeed's question. Just because we've identified, or the clerk identifies the situation, doesn't mean we need to do anything necessarily. Okay.
Well, I'm just trying to ask questions right now. I would somewhat disagree from a public policy perspective, because just because you think you're in the right does not inhibit you from facing litigation and costs related thereto. So I see our job as, you know, insulating us from undue risk, and that does not seem like
I wasn't asking, but I was asking, Attorney Klein, I wasn't asking on a policy basis. I was asking, are we going to be are we going to be stopped from raising it later?
Got it. I just have two other questions and then I'll yield. So
Can we follow up on that just for a moment? Before you go on to the
Yeah,
next
so-
subject, just
yeah.
this, my understanding, I think what the attorney said, if someone has a 3-year contract and the appointment ends in 1 year, and that the appointment is not renewed by the council, then, and here's my question to, is if the department head with the contract, all right, can that department head with the contract then go into court and try to enforce the contract? I thought what you said earlier is what case law establishes that generally does not happen, or is it a possibility, or what?
So it's definitely a possibility that that's what the employee would try to do. And, people can try anything legally. I can never tell you that somebody won't make that claim. And I think in this situation, it probably pretty predictable that an employee would make that claim or something similar. In my opinion, the city would have a strong argument based on case law and different municipal finance sort of guidelines, that the contract would not be enforceable in that type of situation. In almost any case, if the person's not appointed.
Okay, thank you.
Back to Councilor Z.
Sorry.
Right, thank you. I'll just ask
Hold
one more
on,
and then
hold on. Let's, I just want to stay on this one as
Yeah,
well.
okay, go ahead.
Move away from it.
Councilor, that's Councilor Devlin, Darren.
I'm going to follow my elder's lead and interrupt. Just so it doesn't go anywhere. Attorney Klein, how far would this type of suit get? Like, so my questions just on this from 5 down on question 5 down was, breach by the city ? Breach of the good faith and fair dealing. How far would what are the causes of actions that a typical employee in this situation would put forth, and how far would they get in a court proceeding? Would it survive summary judgment?
I mean, it's hard to answer that question specifically without seeing the claims and the facts. But I mean, you did name some of the things. I mean, they would file for breach of contract. They would file for, breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealing. But in my opinion, you would have. I think, and again, hard to predict without seeing the complaint, but I think you'd have a chance to get it dismissed prior to summary judgment with actually a motion to dismiss. And if that failed, I do think you would have a chance with motion for summary judgment. And I would expect it, under these bare facts. I mean, I think you would have a good chance. I can't tell you with any prospective litigation without knowing all the facts and knowing who you have as a judge and everything else. I certainly can't guarantee that result, but I think you would be on strong legal ground. It's about as best I can tell you.
Because we run into this issue a lot where we're all part of the city governance.
Sure.
We are at odds sometimes, as it is normal in this type of bifurcated or bicameral,
Sure.
rule that government that I just find this hard to believe. One city actor is entering into a contract that city actor is in the best position to know that they need an appointment, and it's going to fall on the side of the private person, the employee, which I am not an employment law attorney, but it flies in the face of my understanding of employment law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Well, the only thing I would say is, I mean, I guess I'm in an easy position. I'm an at-will employee and could be fired at any time. But I would think that if I was under a term of appointment, I would know that term as well. I mean, that would be pretty important to me as an employee to know how long I'm appointed for. And if I was going to enter into a contract, I would know that I need to be reappointed. I mean, that's kind of pretty basic stuff. And again, I think the reason the way these cases have come out as they are is, remember who we're really talking about when we're talking about city government. It's the city's citizens and taxpayers of Newburyport. And so I think that that body of law is really to protect the taxpayers and the citizens, not necessarily protect the city councilors or the mayor or whomever else we're talking about.
Oh, that's very well said. One last question. So just getting back to question number 5, if there's a salary or increase and we don't fund it, you were saying that the city could say it is not bound by the city council could say it's not bound by the amount, and the mayor and the employee would have to negotiate. In your experience, would that be the outcome, or how many times has an employee said, "Well, that's a breach of my contract, I'm suing you"?
Well, you know, to be honest with you, I haven't really seen that happen all that often. And to be honest with you, I haven't really seen as much as contracts can be not funded. It's not something that happens frequently. Where maybe you see it more frequently is in a tough time like a pandemic. There might be an across the board sort of cut and pay, or for the next year anticipating, you know, things like that, that for the following year, we're going to ask all city department heads to take a 5% decrease. But in that situation, where it's not, you know, what the Department of Revenue has said in a number of decisions is that except for contracts that fall under 41-108N, and I referenced, you know, potentially one contract here, that all other contracts, you know, excluding superintendent, excluding union contracts, are basically in reality a series of one-year contracts that are subject to annual appropriation. So you can call it a 5-year deal, you can call it a 2-year deal. You know, in my opinion, it's a series of one-year deals that are subject to annual appropriation. And if those funds are not provided, the parties need to renegotiate, or, you know, let's just say the salary called for 150 and you funded 130. There's going to have to be a change in that person's pay. And I assume that person's not going to be happy about it. Is going to ask to renegotiate. And, you know, so there's a number of different ways it could go. But I think the most common would be, you know, the position wasn't fully funded. We should sit down and renegotiate the contract.
Thank you.
That's the way I would recommend.
As well. Everybody else.
Councilor Connell has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. President. I think, Darrell, that you may have already, with your last comments, answered my question, but I'll ask it anyway for clarification. Sometimes you come into hard times and you can't make both ends of the budget meet, and you decide to give everyone a cut in pay. Now, there are alternative ways to do this. You can have a RIF where you know, reduction in force.
Sure.
And you know, if you have 40 people, I'm making a number up here at the DPS, you might have to cut 3 or 4 positions. If you have a certain number of teachers, you may have to cut some positions. You may have police or fire the same way, where you have large employment contracts and you're cutting positions. But you can't as easily reduce the number of department heads, because they supervise a certain essential function for the city, or at least that's the presumption. So what you're saying is, let's say we ask each of them, although they have individual employment contracts, to take a 5% haircut in a particular year. If they refuse, where does that leave us?
Okay, so again, just very quickly for union employees and your union department heads, you would have to, there would be a bargaining requirement, an impact bargaining requirement. One of the things that the city does not have to bargain is the reduction in level of services. So the decision to cut positions, but the impact of that decision does have to be negotiated. So in reality, it's the same thing. There's going to be an impact bargaining obligation. For your non-union employees, I think the way I would approach it, quite frankly, is if you're talking about making the reduction in the next fiscal year,
yep,
I would send a letter saying your contract is subject to annual appropriation, I would attach the DOR opinions that I commonly send to my clients and say that, you know, we are going to be recommending 10% reductions in all department head salaries beginning effective July 1st. If you would like to discuss this or, you know, renegotiate, you know, please contact me to discuss. But, you know, I would point out that their contract is subject to annual appropriation and, you know, it's not next year. Now, if you needed to do it in the current year, you know, that's where it becomes, you know, the way I've seen it happen. And again, you know, luckily this doesn't happen all too often, is I would say, listen, because of whatever financial disaster we've faced, we don't have enough money to pay you the rest of the year. We can either change your salary now to keep you employed through June 30th, or we're going to have to lay you off we have no more money to pay you as of April 15th. I made up that date, but you know, so there's a lot of different ways that that it can be done. I mean, these are tough situations. I mean, you know, it's not something that's fun for anybody, whether it be the mayor, the city council, or the department head themselves. But you know, unfortunately, things do happen. I found, especially with department heads, there's generally been a lot of cooperation to kind of lead the pack in making adjustments. You know, to set an example for some of the other employees in the city. So I mean, I really haven't seen too often where a department head has you know, the department heads haven't been very cooperative, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I'm not going to say where, but you can Google it. It's fairly well publicized in another municipality, Massachusetts. All the department heads voluntarily took pay cuts except for one. But you know, that was, you can probably figure it out if you Google search it.
If I may follow, let's assume under those dire circumstances, everyone takes a 5%, including the department heads, pay cut, but a mayor would like to promise someone, look, we'll make it up for you next year. So we'll give you a 5% bump next year, in addition to what you might have otherwise earned through a COLA or something else. That is still subject to appropriation by the council, is it not? Regardless of the commitment the mayor makes.
Yes, absolutely. Every year, every financial piece of the budget is subject to council funding and approval.
Right.
So if you specifically refuse to fund the full costs, the salary line item of that contract, then the mayor would not be able to pay that full amount.
Okay, thank you. And I know these things are hypothetical, but it's good to get some clarity.
Thank you. Councillor McCauley hasn't spoken yet, unless Councillor Zede feels he needs to. No. Okay, Councillor McCauley. You're muted. Still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Council President. I yield to Councillor Zede for the moment because I know he's been waiting. So,
okay.
Thank you. I'll just follow on some of the other themes there. So it's very clear to me that all roads lead to the appropriation, which is sort of what I anticipated coming into tonight as far as City Council is concerned. So my question though is that when you say not fund, or that it's a series of one-year deals, effectively the appropriate course of action for a councillor who has concerns about the nature of some of these agreements is to take corrective action during the budgeting process in order to try and impact change. As far as I'm hearing, that's the only option that one has. And even with that, it's not quite a scalpel, it's more of a sledgehammer in that you can't really discuss the terms of the agreements you don't like, rather than just saying wholesale, this agreement is not acceptable to me. And I'm not imputing anybody else's views, but I'm just asking the question that if you're a city councilor and you're sitting here looking at this and you're thinking to yourself, I'm not sure I like this, that is pretty much your path to affect any change.
I agree with most of what you said with one with one possible correction. I do think if there was part of an employment contract that the city council didn't like because they thought it wasn't a worthwhile expenditure of funds, you do have the right to discuss that in the budget process and, make an adjustment. And, I don't know exactly how your budget is set up, whether line by line or department, but however you needed to, wherever you needed to cut from, you could make it clear why you were cutting. I don't think there's all employment contracts are public records. So there's nothing wrong with saying you are against longevity. And again, I'm just making that up, or, some sort of payment, or you think the salary is too high. Whatever the case may be, that is a proper, that's proper for discussion. Now, if you're starting to get into an employee's performance or disciplinary record or things of that nature, that, in my opinion, would not be appropriate for a public budget discussion. But, your feeling about certain provisions not being a good expenditure of funds, I think is totally appropriate.
Thank you.
Councilor McCauley.
Thank you, Council President. I want to dovetail on this type of question, and thank you, Councilor Z, for bringing it up. I'd like to talk about hypothetical, and I'll use the case of the dog catcher again, so that we can be consistent. So if there's, according to the conversation that's gone on, the council has the right not to fund any line item that they don't agree with in the upcoming budget. So here's the hypothetical. So we had let's say a 2-year appointment for the dog catcher, and they're in their final year, and then they get a 3-year extension to that. So since the council had approved the initial 2-year appointment and subsequent compensation, when does the council step in, for example, and not fund the extension? Do they do it in the current year, which would be the last year of the agreement? Or do they wait until the extension would actually take effect? Again, these are for this is a non-union dog catcher. And when, so do they wait to the second year, which would be the first year of the extension? When is the action appropriate to do it? Do they do it immediately, as you've referenced, that our actions would be done if we didn't like any term of that? And then as a follow-up to that, what happens on, let's say, July 1, the first day, when in a bold move, none of the department heads are funded, and they all have 0 salaries going forward? Where does that leave us in terms of where the city would be?
Okay. A lot of good questions in that. So, I mean, again, I do think that the time for you to weigh in on the contracts don't require your approval, they require your funding. So when that funding request comes in, which you're right, is 99% of the time going to be part of the annual budget process, that would be the time to speak. I certainly think, as like the mayor did this time in sending the contracts up before you, that's an opportunity to even take a vote saying that you're not going to, the council, at least as presently constituted, is not going to fund this contract, at least give the employee and the mayor notice. But I guess you don't officially fund or not fund until that appropriation request is made. But I think you can clearly send a signal or official vote saying that, as of right now, we would not fund this salary or this contract. That would at least give the parties more notice. If you do not fund any of the department head positions, well, I'm not sure what form that takes. I mean, obviously, if there is any money appropriated, the employee could decide to continue working without a contract and be paid the salary that's been appropriated. or they could decide to go on. If you zero out the salary completely, well, then you're right. You're sitting here on July 1st without without your dog catcher.
That answer your questions, Counselor Holly?
It did. Just one point of clarification. The contracts have not officially been sent to us. We have these documents through investigative and request formats, not as a formal presentation to the council. Thank you. Thank you very much for my time.
Okay. Let me ask a question about presentation of contracts before we go to Councilor Tantar. So it's only the union contracts that actually have to be presented, right?
Correct.
Okay. And there's what's the deadline and when does the clock start ticking on those?
Well, there's a we call this the least enforced law in Massachusetts, and
Yeah, okay.
there's a reason for it. It's not so much in cities, but in towns it is never enforced. Under the law, when the parties reach a contract, it's required to be submitted for a union contract. It's required, the first year cost items are required to be submitted to funding within 30 days of the agreement.
Okay.
Why is that never enforced in the town? Because
they have town meeting. Yeah.
And if you're a union, do you want your contract and your raise to be a one article, a one warrant article at a town meeting where the only thing that's going to be discussed is your raise? No.
Yeah.
So unions never asked to enforce it. I think cities are a little bit better about it, but the union's never going to complain, if it takes 130 days. But you are required to once a union contract is signed, it's required to be submitted within 30 days under Chapter 150, Section 7.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Councilor Tantar.
Yeah, thank you. I have another hypothetical. Along the same.
Dog catcher is not feeling good about their future at the moment.
Dog catcher, no, not at all. So we're going to have the maybe the dog enforcement officer, which is a little different. Say has a 3-year contract, and let's say it starts fiscal year 22 on July 1st of this year. And let's say that the council has no objection to the terms of that contract other than years 2 and 3 of funding. In other words, the council would be fine if the contract was a 1-year contract, but objects to years 2 and 3. So could the council then say, okay, we're not going to fund it for fiscal year 22 unless you go back and renegotiate the entirety of the contract?
Well, I mean, I think all you can do is make that statement or even take a vote showing, what the council would do right now. I mean, and if I were.
Right, excuse me, right now being for.
So
for
like
the budget we're voting on.
you can't take a budget action for FY 23 and FY 24,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Now. Okay, so you would have a couple options. You could not, for that reason, you could not fund the contract for FY 22 and indicate that you'd be okay if a 1-year contract was brought back, or you can fund the contract for FY 22, but take a vote, or however you wanted to do it, that the consensus does not want to see a multi-year contract and wants to see, for the next budget, a 1-year contract brought back.
But of course, that would not be binding on a
Wouldn't be
future city
binding.
council, right?
It would not be binding on a future
Right.
city council.
Thank you. Right.
Okay. Councilor Devlin. You're muted.
There we go. Yeah, I know. I was playing up on that fact.
Yeah.
Just a quick, just before we get too far away from, I had just 2 other. In your question number, actually, it was in your discussion about the finance director, or it was actually about appointment versus contract. You said you suspect that most of our contracts are indefinite appointments. First of all, why do you say that? But second of all, what's the site that indefinite appointments never need to come back?
Okay, what I said is, I didn't say your contracts are indefinite. I said
Sorry, my appointment.
many of your city officials, I would suspect, are under indefinite appointments. And the reason I said that is I represent a lot of cities and towns, and most employees are at-will employees who are appointed indefinitely, or even just cause employees who are appointed indefinitely. Most appointments aren't for a term of years. There are certain statutes that limit the terms of appointments for certain positions. There aren't that many, but there are some. That is what I was based that on. I also based that on that, at least in my review of your charter and ordinances, I didn't see anything that set a limit on the terms of appointment. I don't know that to be true, that most of your appointments are indefinite. I said I would assume that many of your employees
Yeah,
are, but-
just to break the ice. Actually, it's the opposite. Newburyport's unusual, I guess, because most of our positions do have definite terms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me just ask. So, but do you have a site for the statement that indefinite appointments are never can be? I find that would seem. I just when you were talking about how this was done to protect the taxpayers and our residents, I would think that having indefinite appointments would is there a case on this that this discusses?
I mean, no, there's, I don't want to say there's a case or a statute. It's just, so for instance, for your union employees, almost very few of them, except for your department heads, maybe, from almost everyone else, they are not appointed for a term of years. Your police officers, your firefighters, your teachers over on the other side. What they have to do is they have to fulfill a probationary period during which they're at will, basically. And once they complete that probationary period, they're essentially tenured. So that's just how most public employees are treated. And even it's probably different for your department heads. I made that assumption, maybe incorrectly so in Newburyport, but for many of your employees, they are not appointed for a term of years.
Okay. One last question about
the only thing I was just going to say with that too is remember for some of your indefinite appointments that are not unionized or not under contract, it's actually a good thing for the city or town because they would be at-will employees, which means that even though they're under an indefinite appointment, if they're not under a contract and they're not in a union and they're not under one of these very rare statutes that create cause or just cause of tenure, they're at will. And you can terminate them at any time for any reason or no reason at all, as long as it's not an illegal reason. Whistleblower, because of a certain race or gender or sexual orientation. Those are illegal reasons. But other than that, you can terminate an at-will employer for no reason at all or any reason.
Okay, a subset of this. So void for public policy reasons, looking for bad faith, and one of you were saying was an unusual length of time. What are other typical factors? And do you know of any cases that you could cite me for those?
I couldn't give you the name of the cases right now off the top of my head, but I think the most common are sort of the sunset appointments. 11:59 p.m. There's 15 people appointed on either the councilors, the city council's last day of their term, or the mayor's last day of the term. That would be something that could possibly be done in bad faith and would certainly be an issue that would be looked at. If you give a 15-year contract to an employee where you don't see any contracts of those terms, and it's very unlikely. Where an appointment is done, obviously it's illegal. A lot of appointments of immediate family members are illegal. But let's say somebody's best friend was appointed and given an unusual salary or an unusual contract. Those are the types of things that could be evidence of bad faith.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Circling back around. So Councillor Zede.
I just saw Councillor Lane hasn't spoken yet. I could defer to him if you wish, Mr. President.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you. Yeah, just to back up a second on that. What would a reason, I mean, I know if you work with a lot of municipalities, what would a reason be for a new contract to be outside of, 12 months from its expiration? Is that typical or?
What would a reason be?
Right.
I'm not sure I would say it is. It's not uncommon. I'm not sure I'd say it's typical. I think that I certainly see it happen. I'm not saying it happens in most cases, but I would say it's not incredibly unusual either. What would be a reason? You're afraid of losing the employee. Employee comes to you, says, my contract ends up in a year or two. I'm getting an offer from, a bordering city or town. I'd really like to stay in Newburyport, but the other place is offering me a 5-year contract. That would be a reason, legitimate business reason for doing so.
Okay.
You think the employee is a great employee and you want to get ahead of that. Maybe the employee doesn't come to you, but you say, I really don't want this person shopping around. I was, X age once, and I, think that it's important that we keep this employee and give them some more job security.
Okay. So what I'm understanding is that basically what you're saying, the contracts are about as worth as much as the paper they're written on when it comes down to it in terms of opening up the city to liability.
Well, I don't want to go that far. I would say that they, in my opinion, except for contracts that fall under 108N, that they are a series of 1-year contracts that are subject to annual appropriation. I think if a contract was inconsistent with the city council's appointing authority and the city council properly exercised that appointing authority, I think you would be on strong legal ground. Nobody wants to see lawsuits, and every lawsuit's a risk, but I think that you would be on strong legal grounds to exercise your appointing authority, even if there's a contract that went beyond it. So if an employee was under a contract in 2024, the appointment ended on June 30th, 2021, there was a recommendation for reappointment and the council chose not to approve. Under those facts, in my opinion, you would be on strong legal ground that the remaining part of that contract is legally unenforceable. But I am not the judge who will be making that decision, or the jury.
Okay.
Thank you. Now Councillor Zede and then Councillor Tantar.
Thank you. So hopefully relatively quick questions. First one is, I just want to get ahead of a question for the future that probably will come up for us. Because these contracts are all public record, our conversations on these matters should be in open session, as we are doing today. Because when this comes up in the budget and trying to put together meetings for that as we go forward, is that your general advice that because these contracts effectively become public the moment they're signed, and many of them have been, that it's all material for open session, not closed?
I would say usually, I will give you one exception is, and it's not that unusual of an exception. If the conversation is during the negotiation process, maybe there's some there's a desire from the executive branch to have a conversation with the council about, what the financial situation is and maybe how things should be bargained, then there is at least a possibility that some of that discussion may fall under negotiation strategy. But I would agree with you for the most part, most of these should be in open session because you don't negotiate the contract. But I do think it's possible that it could be. I've seen joint meetings, actually. I've seen joint meetings between the executive branch, your a finance committee and a city council, just to talk about a lot of the different contract negotiation strategy in certain areas. So I do think it's possible that a legitimate negotiation strategy discussion could be had in executive session.
Got it. And then the second question is, what would your advice be to us if we receive an appointment? So the reverse, actually. So we've been talking a lot about having a contract that extends beyond the bounds of an appointment, but what about the other direction where you have an appointment come in and you have no contract for it? What's your advice on that? To, again, treat them as separate things and say, okay, we'll make the appointment for, say, 2 years with no contract, the reverse situation, in other words. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts counsel for us.
So are you saying that?
So we
Well,
have an
I-
appointment come in to us
Yep.
for approval, and in any one of a different situations could happen. There's no contract, right? There's just
Well, it
simply
doesn't have
none.
to be a contract.
Yeah, I mean, as a management attorney, I love there being no contract because it
Yeah.
means they're essentially at will.
Why
and
are
there's-
you assuming there's a contract?
But I mean, I
Well,
guess.
because one could be executed. I mean, so you make the appointment, and then the next day a contract's executed for 5 years. And so again, it's a question of synchronizing the timing of when you get to speak on something. And we keep coming down to you have a one time a year shot, and it's in May when you
Well-
have the budget. And other than that, effectively you're outside of all these conversations. You're trying to fix things or keep things from becoming an issue, I think. And that's the
So,
heart of my question.
I think in that situation, what you could do, if it was a desire of the council, is you could say, we would approve this appointment for a 1-year term. You know, if and when a contract is negotiated, we would explore and vote whether or not we want to extend the term of that appointment to match the term of the contract. Otherwise, we expect it to be a 1-year term contract.
Okay. Okay.
So if the recommendation was for a 3-year term, but you were uncomfortable doing so without seeing the contract, you could either table the vote, obviously, or you could say you want to see the contract first,
Yeah.
or you could exercise a little bit more control or a little bit more order by maybe limiting the term of the initial appointment until such time as a contract's put in front of you.
Got it. And can you condition an appointment on something like that? Or
No, I don't think you can
time
condition.
limited?
In my opinion, you couldn't legally condition it, but I think you could adjust the term of the appointment for that reason.
Okay, and I appreciate that. So I'm going to wrap up here. Those were all my questions. I just want to say thank you to Attorney Klein for the time, and just to say publicly for the record that, you know, what I feel I'm looking at is essentially a wholesale. Almost all the contracts are open, which gives me great pause, and I feel like we've been put in a pretty terrible position, unfortunately. But it is our job to respond to it, and that was the nature of my questions. And I went to great extents and length, not to mention any specific person or contract in these public conversations. I don't know that we'll be able to hold to that as we go through the budget, but I just wanted to say that for the record and go on record saying that. So I'll yield, and I'm all set. Thank you very much, and thank you both.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tantar. You're muted.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to pursue a little bit your answer to question 3, which is whether or not there is a legal limit length on the length of contracts. I think your answer was there's no legal limit, but the general rule of thumb was 3 to 5 years. And then you went on to say that, say Mayor B succeeding Mayor A could challenge a contract for public policy grounds. And I'm just wondering what you meant by that. And just to give a little more detail, what if the employee's contract states that they can be removed only for just cause?
So I don't think I said the mayor, I didn't, when I said that a contract could be challenged for public policy grounds, I didn't say the new mayor could. I said, I guess really anybody could, to be honest with you. It could be a 10 taxpayer suit. It could be the council, it could be the mayor, it could be, you know, any number of parties.
Okay, yep.
But as far as just cause,
yeah,
I do not think you could overturn a contract for that reason, because as much as I don't like it, many of your highest department heads, it is not uncommon to have cause or just cause in their contracts. If I'm sent a contract for a high level official, I would always recommend removing just cause and going to a lower standard or even cause. But I would say most times, especially cause, maybe just cause is a little bit less common for your highest level employees, but it's in my opinion still way too prevalent. But cause is very common in most employment contracts. even as much as I really do believe your highest level management employees shouldn't be cause or just cause. But many are, and it's not uncommon, and I don't see how you would overturn, that would not be, that without a lot more would not be evidence of bad faith to overturn a contract.
So regardless of who challenges it, it's unlikely that that contract could be challenged until it went to term.
Well,
Hold
unless
on.
there's other facts.
Time out. That's just on the question of just cause, though. So
Yeah.
if the position is still subject to appointment.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah.
Okay.
Or I mean, the appropriation could be.
Or appropriation, right.
Yep.
Yeah, but I was just following through on
Termination.
termination of a contract, just to make sure I understood, and I do know. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm done.
All right. Back to Councillor Lane.
Thanks. I wanted to thank Attorney Klein for coming. And also, do we have all of the contracts now? I'm curious. Are there any outstanding contracts that we do not have?
Well,
I have the ones that
do that here.
preceded the ones that were recently re-signed.
Well, we'll take that up with Clerk Jones. I don't want to keep running the taxi meter with Darren. So
Yeah, that's fine.
okay. Councillor Vogel. You're muted. You're still muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. More of a statement than a question, I think, and thank you to the Attorney Klein. I appreciate all of your time. I'm a little bit, I feel blindsided and puzzled as to where all this came from. What's the genesis of all this? I'm wondering how many other of you received the questions that were presented to the attorney. Yeah, I certainly didn't see them. So I feel blindsided, and I'm just curious as to what the genesis is for this last hour and change discussing this.
I'll answer that. The city council has supervisory power over departments. We confirm all department head appointments. We also have budget season coming up. I put it on the calendar. I have the right to do that as the president of the city council. I also have the ability to communicate with the city solicitor, who represents not only the mayor, but also the city council. So I am responsible for putting it on the calendar. Thank you.
May I follow up?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm curious as to the genesis. I mean, are there issues? Are there unhappiness? Are there conflicts?
It's come to the attention of city council that there are certain department head contracts that have recently been signed that are out of sync with their appointments. So for example, dog catcher may have a contract signed for 5 years, but the appointment is up in 2.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I just had one last question, Councillor Klein, Attorney Klein, and that is non-cost items. So we did talk about, for example, termination for cause. I have other questions, just miscellaneous things, because I mean, really the system, especially with union contracts, really doesn't lend itself for the legislature to get into the nitty-gritty necessarily. So for example, say there's an employment contract with a department head which says you only have to work 20 hours a week. How would that, is that something that the city council has no say in? And again, they can only object through the appointment process and the appropriation process?
I mean, I would say from a literal standpoint, yes, but I mean, again, I think that it's that in that type of situation, I think you can you can expressly send a very clear message saying that we're not going to fund a contract that has just cause in it, or that has an employee working 20 hours a week when we need somebody for 35 hours a week, or the converse. We're not going to approve a contract for a 21-hour-a-week employee when you start getting health insurance at 20 hours. I mean, there's a number of different issues that can come up. So yes, I mean, you don't control the language of the contract. That is the mayor, and that's what she has been elected to do. But I mean, there's ways when you make funding decisions to state, why you're making them.
Okay. All right, that's very helpful. And thanks for giving us, first of all, thanks for coming on at 8 o'clock sharp. You did as promised and staying with us for over an hour. Thanks very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with all of you. Great questions, great discussion. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Everyone stay.
Whoop. Okay, onward. We had tabled the, Counselor Tantar, you have a point of
I
order?
was going to move to take appointment 239 off the table.
There we go.
Second.
We need a roll call, unfortunately.
Roll call on the motion to remove from the table appointment 239. Counselor Tantar,
Yes.
Counselor Vogel,
Yes.
Counselor Wallace,
Yes.
Counselor Zede,
Yes.
Counselor Devlin,
Yes.
Counselor Khan,
Yes.
Counselor Lane,
Yes.
Counselor McCauley,
Yes.
Counselor Connell,
Yes.
Counselor Shan,
Yes.
Counselor Eigenman.
Yes.
There is now, I believe, Mr. President, a motion to approve on the table that was.
And it was seconded, right?
It was made by, I have Counselor Khan, seconded by Counselor Tantar.
Any discussion now that we've heard from the city solicitor? Okay, just remind us, this is through, it's a one-year appointment through April 1, 2022, right?
That's correct.
Okay, roll call.
This is second reading for Kevin Hunt, 14 10th Street, veterans until 4/1/2022. Counselor Tantar,
Yes.
Counselor Vogel,
Yes.
Counselor Wallace,
Yes.
Counselor Zede,
Yes.
Counselor Devlin,
Yes.
Counselor Khan,
Yes.
Counselor Lane,
No.
Counselor McCauley,
Yes.
Counselor Connell,
Yes.
Counselor Shan,
Yes.
Counselor Eigenman.
Yes.
10 yes, 1 no, motion passes.
Orders.
Orders, we have, the first order is the order 244, which is an order relative to a special act. This is a so-called home rule charter order submitted by Counselor Eigenman. It is attached there to the special act to make certain minor amendments to the home rule charters, some relating to the city solicitor, definitions, powers, minor change to a date on capital improvement budget, and that is it.
I'll make a motion to continue to a date certain, May 10th, and then I'll explain.
Second.
If I may, this is something that I brought in as it was going to go on the ballot, and then the clerk pointed out that that was frankly a stupid way to do it, and so I promised I would bring it back, and I did. But it doesn't need to go back to committee because remember we've sort of beaten this to death. It's the same language you saw before.
So, Mr. President, was that your motion? Was that seconded?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, Councilor Connell, I think, seconded, yeah.
I've got Counselor Tantar.
Tantar, sorry. Anyone else? I don't want to step on anyone.
It was Connell, actually.
Okay, so there.
There you go.
Roll call.
So on motion to continue to a date certain, May 10th. Order 244, Counselor Tantar,
Yes.
Counselor Vogel,
Yes.
Counselor Wallace,
Yes.
Counselor Zede,
Yes.
Counselor Devlin,
Yes.
Counselor Khan,
Yes.
Counselor Lane,
Yes.
Counselor McCauley,
Yes.
Counselor Connell,
Yes.
Counselor Shan,
Yes.
Counselor Eigenman.
Yes. Thank you. Order 245.
Order 245 is recently submitted by jointly Counselor Shan, Tantar, and Wallace It relates to chapters 164, section 134, with respect to aggregation of electric power. It goes for a page and a half. If you'd like me to read it, I'd be happy to.
Well, hold on. Before we do that, I just need a motion.
Motion to refer to Committee on Public Utilities.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Councilor Tantar, go ahead.
Sure. Just very quickly, some background. As you may recall, Communication 292 came in regarding the electricity aggregation program, was referred to the Committee on Public Utilities. We considered it. We've had 2 meetings on it, actually 3 meetings on it now. And we determined that there was no necessity for the committee to once again approve the electrical aggregation plan. But we did think it was wise to put forth this order forward for a number of reasons. First of all, just quickly to frame it for you, because the committee will be considering it, and we would like other councilors to weigh in if they wish on the subject. We have some questions that are still open, but generally, the aggregation plan that was approved by the Mass Department of Public Utility stated specifically that the city council had a role in first of all approving the ESA, the electrical service agreement, and secondly, in signing it. However, there's a problem with that, and the problem with that is that the aggregation market is such that the decision has to be made in a very tight framework, basically a 3-hour time frame when the numbers are right. And it would be literally impossible for the city council to do what we normally do, which is spend at least 2 meetings. Even under an emergency preamble, it would be difficult to do it. Most other communities, well, no other communities that have approved an aggregation plan have refer it to the council for approval. So we looked around, and what we essentially did is we worked off of the city of Marlborough's plan, which is one of the few committees that provides a specific role. That's what this order reflects. All right. So essentially, what we are proposing here is we establish an ad hoc aggregation committee, as was done in Marlborough, that would consist of the mayor, the city council president, the recycling and energy manager, and 3 members of the energy advisory committee. And they, or at least a quorum that we set at 3, would meet during that 3-hour time frame, 3.5-hour time frame, when the market's right, to make a decision. Right. So that's where this comes from. That's what is essentially what is done in Marlborough, although they have the disadvantage of not having an energy advisory committee as we do, and a very energy advisory committee that's putting in a lot of work and has a lot of expertise. So that's why they're on the committee. So there's some questions. Should we add a second counselor, bring the total number of people up to 7, for instance? We sort of generally discuss that. And secondly, there will be under this first phase, if we do this, if we go ahead and do this, the committee may have to make a decision as to go with the lowest cost option for residential aggregation, or for instance, go with an option that would just be renewable, focus on renewable power. And so the council could provide further guidelines to the aggregation committee that's making that decision. And so those are open questions that we will come to some conclusion next time the committee meets, and any input from the rest of the council would be very much welcome. I also note that the representatives of the aggregator, Colonial Power, is present. If anyone has questions they wish to pose to them.
Okay, well, that is unusual. We have the aggregator on the line. Does anyone have any questions? This is just going to committee, just for the benefit of the public. So we're not actually adopting anything tonight, but you heard the explanation from the sponsor. Anyone else? Okay, roll call.
This is a roll call on the referral to public utility. Councilor Tantar,
Yes.
Councilor Vogel,
Yes.
Councilor Wallace,
Yes.
Councilor Zede,
Yes.
Councilor Devlin,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor McCauley,
Yes.
Councilor Connell,
Yes.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
Councilor Agaman. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Ordinance 68.
Ordinance 68 is a second reading. It is so-called Section 6C of the zoning ordinance. It's been substantially rewritten, if you will. It is sponsored by Councilor Shan.
How about a motion?
Motion to approve on second reading.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion before we take roll call? Roll call.
Roll call on the motion to approve second reading, ordinance 68. Councilor Tantar,
Yes.
Councilor Vogel,
Yes.
Councilor Wallace,
Yes.
Councilor Zede,
No.
Councilor Devlin,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor McCauley,
Yes.
Councilor Connell,
Yes.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
Councilor Agaman.
Yes.
10-1. Motion passes. Ordinance on second reading.
Thank you. Ordinance 72.
Ordinance 72 is likewise a second reading. It is relatively straightforward. It is really the change of one date to August 31st from April 30th, jointly submitted Councilor Zede and Devlin with respect to parks.
Motion to approve on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Motion to approve on second reading. Ordinance 72, Councilor Tantar,
Yes.
Councilor Vogel,
Yes.
Councilor Wallace,
Yes.
Councilor Zede,
Yes.
Councilor Devlin,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor McCauley,
Yes.
Councilor Connell,
Yes.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
Councilor Agaman.
Yes. Thank you. New ordinance 75.
New ordinance 75 is an ordinance to designate a safety zone on Merrimack Street adjacent to the Lower Atkinson Common, establishes under Division 8, Section 13-192, Merrimack Street, Moulton Street to Plummer Ave as the locus. It is jointly sponsored Councilors Wallace, McCauley, and Tantar.
Motion to refer to public safety.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion by the sponsor? Not necessary, but Councilor Wallace, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Just some quick background. First of all, what you see in front of you is a very simple ordinance. It's basically establishing a safety zone, which is very similar to a school zone, but it's allowed for uses next to parks or areas that might have a lot of activity. As we've heard from a lot of the public comment tonight, there is a great need for improving safety in this area during baseball games, because there's many young children, lots of them all at once. And then also when there aren't baseball games, when residents are just trying to get to the park. And we've seen a lot of increased, park usage these last few months. So I think, it's time. We had this unique opportunity where everybody is in agreement. I mean, we have parks and DPS and Pioneer League and the residents, and everybody is saying, it's time to do something. So a safety zone, isn't going to cure everything, but it is a formal designation by the city council saying, we recognize this area needs special protection. The speed limit would go down to 20 miles per hour. And as far as markings and whatever you need, it's not so stringent. So that's something we can work on in committee, but you definitely want it to jump out at drivers as, you know, this is a zone where you need to slow down. There's activity going on here. So, you know, it's a tool to get us where we need to be. Striping is going to be another tool. So we're working on improving the striping over what was there before. And then finally, we're going to need some infrastructure to make this a true safety zone. And not a lot, but there may be some incremental costs. But I think the time is now to do all this rather than do a temporary solution. And I say now, meaning the road work. There will be some future park work. The idea is to get all of the parking internal to the park, but that requires moving the playground, maybe the clubhouse. But right now, we're focused on the road, and we want to get that to as final a condition as we can. So, you know, I look forward to working on it in committee, and, you know, I'll be sure to keep the residents and everybody up to date because things are happening pretty quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is going to public safety.
Correct.
Roll call.
Roll call on the motion to refer to public safety, ordinance 75, Councilor Tantar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Eigenman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. That's it for ordinances. On the committee items. Ad hoc committee on economic development. I think that is springing back to life. Sorry for the pun. The mayor has an ad hoc group for economic development, and we'll start coordinating with them. You heard her say in her update that the outdoor seating is close. Not there yet, but almost. Market Landing. It's a bit of a sad point because we lost Bill Harris, as you heard. I'll have to think of another person to fill his shoes. I'm not sure who that's going to be. The next thing that's going to happen there is we're going to have a meeting on May 3rd. That's a week from tonight, I think. I haven't posted it yet, but Sasaki, our consultant, is going to do a presentation. They've been working away all during April. So that may be one, you know, there may be some interesting drawings. So even if you're not a member of the ad hoc, that may be something you want to tune into. And of course, I'll circulate all the drawings as soon as I have them. I don't have them yet. Chair Z, Budget and Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll start off with a motion to approve transfer 91, which is highway street lights 2646 to Essex North Shore Tech School on the same amount.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is a fairly simple, straightforward transfer. The source account is the highway street lights. You may recall we recently took some money from that account for another transfer, and we again use that as a source here. It is an applicable source because there's an expected overage, really due to sort of how the solar credits fall back to the city, but not an ongoing credit that we would expect to replicate this next year. So it works fine for this transfer, but may not work in future years if needed. The destination is Essex North Shore Tech School, and it's basically simply due to enrollment. The amount again is $2,646, comes out of committee with a recommendation to approve 2-0.
Thank you. Any questions or comments or discussion? Roll call.
Roll call, motion to approve transfer 91, Councilor Tantar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Eigenman.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next up would be a motion to approve transfer number 92, $99,010 from overlay surplus to assessor reevaluation account.
Second.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So the nature of this is that per state law, the assessor is required to do a reevaluation of every property in the city every 5 years, and that time has come up. The entire project is expected to cost this $99,000. So this covers the entire amount of the project. The source of the funds is called overlay surplus, and basically every year there is money set aside for potential abatements and so forth. When those abatements don't end up materializing, some money is essentially left over, and that money is tucked away into the surplus account for the purposes of doing this reevaluation, which comes up every 5 years. So the sources, again, will eventually regenerate on its own. That's the reason there's no balance shown on the transfer, for example, because it is a surplus account. And then on the receiving side, the reevaluation account, again, this is expected to cover the entire endeavor, so there wouldn't be any expected additional transfers to do so. One important question that came up that we discussed in committee was, what should residents expect during this reevaluation process? And the answer is, this is not going to kick off more home visits or site visits by the assessor or the assessor's staff or by a third party. This is primarily a paper exercise. With that said, typical site visits, which are done every year, would be expected to continue. So it's not like every resident should expect their home to be visited this year by the assessor or anything like that. And that's basically the story, and came out of committee with a vote of 2-0 with a recommendation to approve.
Thank you. Other councilors? Well, I have a question. This does seem familiar from 5 years ago. So it's about this cost every time, right? There's not a lot of variance, is there?
We did not ask what it cost last time. I don't know if Ethan's on the line, or I see Jill Brennan actually is in the attendees, Mr. President. Perhaps she would be best suited to answer if this is a fairly stable cost or has changed over those 5 years.
Okay.
I would defer to her.
That'd be great. I have unmuted the assessor. Go ahead, Ms. Brennan.
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Good night, counselors. Yes, I would like to say 3 years ago, it was 95,000.
Okay, so it's pretty steady. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Roll call.
Roll call, approval of transfer 92, Councilor Tontar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
And Councilor Reagan.
Yes, thank you. Next item.
Yes, Mr. President. Next up is a motion to approve transfer number 93, which is a source of general fund events coordinator 5,000, going 500 in part to the auditor miscellaneous supplies and 3,500 to general supplies office.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for the second. So this one was also discussed in committee. Long story short is these are two lines that were cut from the budget by the City Council during the budget process last year. The events coordinator as the source was selected because essentially the position was essentially suspended or furloughed as a result of COVID, leaving somewhat of a surplus there. So that's why the source is available. The transfer two is split. The auditor has stated that the $500 is essentially needed to fund supplies, particularly paper and toner and things like that for the purposes of getting out various forms and so forth that need to go out from that office. The remaining portion of the transfer, the 3,500, is supplies office. That essentially is shared across City Hall departments, and the auditor stated that the primary need for these funds is really paper. And, so essentially they have a shortfall and are coming back for additional funds to fund that here. So 5,000 coming out and then being split 500 and 3,500. This comes out with a recommendation to approve of 2-0, pardon me.
Thank you. Other councilors? Roll call.
Motion to approve transfer 93, Councilor Tontar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Reagan. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. President, next up is a motion to approve transfer 94, 5550 being split 4,500 to parking part-time enforcement officers, and then parking clothing allowance in the remainder of the amount of 1050 for a total transfer of 5550.
Second.
Thank you. So the purpose of this transfer, well, first of all, the typical comments here. So the source of the funds is the paid parking fund. This is a fund that was loaded with all of the cash when we formalized the parking fund and transferred the money. There's about $1 million in there. And the 5550 gets split into two parts, as mentioned. $4,500 is essentially salary, hourly salary for part-time parking enforcement officers. And then $1,050 goes to clothing allowance for the same. Now, really, the bigger part of this discussion is that, as we just learned, and as we hopefully knew or think we knew, approving the first year of a contract in the cases of a union contract does bind the city for the other 2 years. And so attached to this, you will find that this is a 3-year contract. And essentially, as paralleling the transfer, the two main changes are the rates of pay. And then the second is the clothing allowance. We had the Chief of Staff, Matt Coogan, who obviously deals with the collective bargaining agencies, visit with us at budget and did speak to those changes. They were available for inspection there. The justification, particularly on the wages, was bringing things more in line with current expected hourly rates to be competitive. And then the other thing that was mentioned that's important is that the $4,500 line is really what the anticipated annual effect of this new budget of this new contract would be on an ongoing basis. The clothing allowance is really more of a one-time thing. As you can see on the transfer, it was retro back to July 1, 2020. So bottom line is approving this contract would be expected to have about a $4,500 a year annual impact on the budget, and parking now, as you know, is folded into the general budget. So this comes to you with a motion to approve or recommend approval 2-0 from the Committee on Budget and Finance.
Other counselors? Okay, before we vote, I just asked, could we just read into the record for the public? We all have it, but what the wage scale is and we heard the clothing allowance.
Mr. Clerk, do you want to read it or do you want me to?
I'd be happy to. Article 12, wages. FY21 starting rate $15.90. After 1 year of service, it's $17.65. FY22 16.32. After 1 year, it's $18.07. And FY23 16.74. After 1 year, it's $18.49.
Okay, great. All right, everyone got that? Roll call.
Roll call on a motion to approve transfer number 94. Councilor Tontar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Argument.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. And next one is a motion to approve order number 243, which is an acceptance with gratitude, a gift from the Friends of Newburyport Trees in the amount of $9,500.
Second.
Thank you. So this was heard by Budget and Finance at the same meeting. Long story short is the Friends of Newburyport Trees were kind enough to make this donation. The Tree Commission Chair, who you heard speak at public comment, did speak to the potential utilization of these funds. And I think maybe to summarize it best, the money is really going to be used, I think, to catch up on maintenance. And the chair was very clear that she did not want this to be considered or taken against any funding that may be allocated in the next budget, and that more funding is certainly needed as there are outstanding tree requests that unfortunately can't be fulfilled. So the good news is it's a nice gift. The committee recommends by a vote of 2-0 that we accept this gift. And again, it will be used primarily to catch up on caring for trees, not so much putting new ones in, with the hope that in the subsequent years, there'll be more funding available to get back to honoring those requests. And the chair is, I believe, still still with us in the attendees there. So if there are other questions that I neglected, perhaps she would be best suited to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, debate? Roll call.
Roll call approving order 243. Councilor Tontar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Agaman. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And last thing, Mr. President, is no more items, but just a brief update. As a reminder, this Thursday, we have our final meeting on the capital improvement plan. We are anticipating Newburyport Youth Services, Police, Fire, and the Planning Department attending to speak to their respective projects, so your questions are welcome. We will also, depending on how the time goes, make an effort to have some brief deliberation if there's an interest in doing so. But that is our last committee meeting on the CIP. We are headed for a vote on that on May 10th. And there is no rest for the weary. So on that night, we take in the budget and then we start all over again. And that schedule is out there. In communicating with Chief of Staff Matt Coogan, we may have a few workshop changes where we might move some things around, but keeping the dates so that the dates you have are still solid, just which departments come. We're just trying to finalize that because we had some late minute conflicts and so forth. So again, 29th Thursday CIP wrap, the 10th vote, and then right into the budget. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Chair Khan, Education.
Yes, thank you, Council President. Motion to remove late file item communication 240, the memo regarding the statement of interest submission information.
Second.
Great.
Well, do you want to take out other stuff? We can do it all at once.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Also, motion to remove late file communication 293, a letter from Jane Snow.
Second collectively, maybe.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call on removing those two items.
Councilor Tantar,
Yes.
Councilor Vogel,
Yes.
Councilor Wallace,
Yes.
Councilor Zede,
Yes.
Councilor Devlin,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor McCauley,
Yes.
Councilor Connell,
Yes.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
Councilor Argument.
Yes.
They are out.
Great. Thank you. A motion to receive and file communication 240.
Second.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you. As we heard in the mayor's update, the MSBA grant application was not accepted for this project. And we decided to keep the memo because in anticipation of moving forward, but there will be a resubmittal. So at this time, the committee recommends receiving and filing, and we will be seeing as we heard, a new application.
Thank you. Further discussion. Roll call.
Motion to receive and file communication 240. Councilor Tantar,
Yes.
Councilor Vogel,
Yes.
Councilor Wallace,
Yes.
Councilor Zede,
Yes.
Councilor Devlin,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor McCauley,
Yes.
Councilor Connell,
Yes.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
Councilor Argument.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Also, motion to receive and file communication 293, letter from Jane Snow.
Second.
Go ahead.
Great, thank you, Council President. So this was a letter we received back in February regarding from one of our residents in terms of the conversation around the naming of the Rupert Knock. And one of the things we talked about briefly in committee that was shared by the superintendent and was the efforts of the DEI, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group. And there'll be these specific kind of facilitated public forums. And this is one of the topic areas that were identified for a conversation with the public. So it was helpful to have the resident also in our committee meeting. And we talked a little bit about just the general sentiments and moving forward and how do we address things like this. So the committee approved 2-0 to receive and file this for now.
Thank you. Other councilors? Roll call.
Motion to receive and file communication 293. Councilor Tantar,
Yes.
Councilor Vogel,
Yes.
Councilor Wallace,
Yes.
Councilor Zede,
Yes.
Councilor Devlin,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor McCauley,
Yes.
Councilor Connell,
Yes.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
Councilor Argument.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further items?
Nope, just a reminder, the Education Committee was meeting on Monday, May 3rd. As we heard from the mayor, the budget will be discussed and deliberated by the school committee tomorrow night. And then on May 3rd, if there are questions, if others want to join us too, but we will have our regularly scheduled Education Committee meeting at 5:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. General government, there's nothing in committee, nothing to report. Chair Devlin, license and permits?
Yes, with apologies to the council president and the council themselves for more roll call votes. I would like to try to take out two items that were not in the package. I just boneheaded on them, but we did have a meeting on them. One was application 22. I'd like to move collectively to waive the rules for application 22 from 3/8/21, which is a pool table application for a barber shop and clothier, and also application 24 from 3/29/21 for a second hand motor vehicle sales application out in the industrial park.
Second.
Okay, so that's an omnibus motion seconded by Councilor Tantar to both bring them out and waive the rule because it's not in the packet. Any questions, comments, gripes? Roll call.
Roll call on the collective motion for applications 22 and 24. Councilor Tantar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Agaman.
Yes. Anything else?
Motion to approve application 22 from 3/8/21.
Second.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, we met with Eric Aremo, who is opening up Banter Barber and Clothier in the former Fluke's Finds and Friends location on State Street at 80 State Street. In it, as part of the decor, he's going to have a pool table. It's mostly going to be for displaying merchandise, but there will be times when it will be uncovered and people will be able to play on it for free. And he needs to apply for this pool permit license to do it. It came out of committee 3-0 with an recommendation to approve.
Thank you, Chair. Any other councilor? Roll call.
Motion to approve application 22. Councilor Tantar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane. Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Agaman.
Yes. Go ahead, Chair.
Motion to approve application 24 from 3/29/21, Plum Island Classic Car.
Second.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, Plum Island Classic Cars is at 18 Graff Road in unit number 22. That's up behind the new building that's being built next to Fuel. It's a big commercial building. They have in it a garage bay where they restore 60s, 70s, and 80s muscle cars, which Councilor Tantar was very interested in, reliving his heyday. And they have about 4 cars in there at any one time. They're inside the building. They're not being displayed. To buy them, you have to come by appointment only. And usually, for instance, they have 2 cars that are getting ready to be done, and they'll be ready to be put on out for sale. It came out of committee, approved 3-0, but with the condition there's an error in the application, which I later confirmed with the applicant. They had written down they were applying for an automobile 1 license, which is new cars, and it should be 2. So with that amendment, it was recommended 3-0 for approval. Thank you.
Okay, everyone know what we're voting on? So it's category 2 used vehicles. Roll call.
Motion to approve application 24 with that condition. Councilor Tantar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Council McCauley,
Yes.
Council Connell,
Yes.
Council Shan,
Yes.
and Council Agaman.
Yes, thank you. Anything further?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair Connell, Neighborhood City Service.
Nothing to report out of committee, but I do want to advise members that the committee is meeting on Tuesday, May 4th at 7 p.m. in a Zoom meeting to discuss items that are on our agenda here in committee, but also a neighborhood issue related to fencing along Hale Street.
Ah, that's right. Okay, thank you. Chair Shan, Planning and Development.
Nothing coming out of committee, but just a reminder to folks that we do have a joint hearing with the planning board on May the 5th to discuss ordinance 73, which is the zoning amendment for storage warehousing in the industrial park.
Thank you, Chair. Chair McCauley, Public Safety.
Nothing coming out tonight. Just a reminder, we're going to have a hearing on the Merrimack Street Safety Zone next week. So more information to come. We'll move with some urgency. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Tantar, Public Utilities.
Motion to approve appointment 240.
Second.
Second.
Go ahead.
Yes, this is the mayor appointed William Creelman to the Water and Sewer Commission. The Committee on Public Utility met with Mr. Creelman on April 20th. Mr. Creelman is a structural engineer, was educated at Wentworth Institute and Northeastern University. Extensive experience as a structural engineer. He was a clerk of the works a number of times, owner's representative, project manager, director of purchasing for a major corporation with responsible $80 million contracts per year. Operated his own business a number of times. Also, he moved here just a year ago from Concord. And in the town of Concord, he served on a number of building committees, community centers, schools, and library. He served on the site committee to relocate light plant and public works. And he did 3 years on their Board of Appeals. We asked Mr. Creelman why he applied. He said he saw the announcement that there was an opening in the paper, and he felt that as a resident, he felt it was an obligation to contribute to the community, and he thought he had skills that would contribute. The committee strongly agreed with him. We're very grateful that he stepped forward to do this, and we recommend approval 3-0.
Thank you. Other councilors on Mr. Creelman's appointment. Roll call.
Roll call. Councilor Tantar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
And Councilor Agaman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it, Mr. President.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Chair Vogel, rules.
I have nothing tonight.
Thank you, Chair. Good of the order.
Mr. President, just one thing I forgot to mention. On Thursday for the CIP, we're going to start at 5:30 because there's another meeting in the evening. So please note we're going to start at 5:30 and Youth Services is going to come first to accommodate that time. So you should have all gotten a Zoom link, but that's why. So
5:30. All right. Okay, that reminds me the Sasaki presentation's going to be at 7:30 because with the mayor, we're going to try and accommodate the mayor because she has a 6:30 business meeting with Chair Khan's group. Go ahead, Councilor Tantar.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to note for the record that during the 70s and 80s, to no one's surprise, I drove a van and not a muscle car. I just wanted that to be clear to everyone. Thank you.
W van.
A van. It wasn't a VW. Chevy van, Buy American.
Before GTO.
The Scooby van. The Scooby-Doo van.
All right. Anything else? Nope. How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion to adjourn. Councilor Tantar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
I drove a Volkswagen van. Yes.
Air cooled. Yeah.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
and Counselor Eigenman.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody.
Good night. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye.